Well, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folari. Hope you had a great weekend. Let's begin the week at a nifty pace. Dr. Muda Yusuf is our guest this morning. Dr. Yusuf is the CEO, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprises, and he joins us remotely, that is to say, via Zoom. Good morning to you, Dr. Muda Yusuf.
Good morning, Uncle Yori. Great to be with you.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, to talk about Nigeria's economic reforms, said that by and large it's pleased with it, but it then warns that there still are areas, much has been done that they commend, but they say that the point is that there still are aspects of it that indicate or portend a danger if we don't take care of matters. And so I said, okay, good thing we have Dr. Yusuf coming on. What are those things that they are talking about? They, for one, they said, look, it's good that the subsidy on fuel has been removed, but then what happens if there's a shortfall in the production of fuel and those kind of things? So maybe I just said that to start with, but maybe you could also enlighten us if there is indeed any areas of worry as we go along, because a lot of people are commending the gains as a result of the economic reforms. In trickles, to be sure, in trickles. We would want it to be an outpouring, but things don't work like that. But what do you think, Dr. Yusuf?
Well, thank you very much. Very good question. There are, I think, three major ways or metrics that we could use to assess the reform or economic performance so far.
Okay.
There is the metric of the macroeconomic indicators, which is about macroeconomic stability. That will speak to things like the exchange rate stability, not the costs, but the stability.
Okay.
That will speak to things like the GDP. It will speak to things like inflation. These are very critical variables in an economy when you talk about the stability of an economy. Stability is one thing. The cost is another thing. But stability is important for confidence building, especially among investors.
Okay.
It makes it easier for people to plan. It reduces uncertainty, it reduces turbulence, and it generally helps confidence of investors. So to that extent, I think a measure of stability has been achieved. Because don't forget, although this may sound like a broken record, the administration inherited an economy that was practically broken from a macroeconomic point of view.
Okay.
Although there was a lot of things that were concealed, a lot of patching up that was going on, but when you look at the economy from both the fiscal side, I'm talking about the fiscal operations of government, from the point of view of the external position, I'm talking now about, our balance of payment position, our foreign, it was really very, very bad. So the stability that we have achieved, it is something that is very good fundamentally, because you need to fix the foundation before you begin to talk of superstructures.
Okay.
So that is one thing that is positive. Then there is the angle of productivity in the economy. And that has to do with cost of production, cost of logistics, cost generally around the economy. And this has implications also for inflation. It has implications for the sustainability of businesses, for profitability, and even business growth. On the score of productivity in the economy, we are still struggling with that. Because productivity has to do a lot with your infrastructure. It has a lot to do also with your institutions. The infrastructure in this economy has been broken cumulatively over the years. Whether you are talking about power infrastructure, you are talking about the rail system, you are talking about the roads, you are talking about waterways, you are talking about even ICT infrastructure. So these are challenges that impact on productivity. And in fairness with the administration, these are not things you can fix in 2 years.
Okay.
Because some of these sectors have suffered negligence over the decades. Take, for instance, our rail system. When last have you had a major investment in rail? The same thing with our power sector. You know, many of the facilities on our national grid are aging, they are collapsing. The discos are struggling with the facilities that they bought into. The generation infrastructure is still an issue. So many issues around the structural issues in the economy. So that is another way of looking at economic performance. We are not doing so well as far as factors driving productivity is concerned.
Okay.
Then the third one, which is perhaps most important, is the issue of welfare. Now, to the average person, economy performance is about welfare. What is the price of bread? What is the price of fuel? What is the price of tomatoes? What is the price of garri? What is the cost of transportation? What is the cost of cooking gas? What is the cost of noodles? These are basic issues that affect welfare of the people. Again, the welfare is related largely to the issue of productivity in the economy. It's also related in a way to issues of the macroeconomic environment. So these are basic metrics that people from different perspectives could assess the economy. And the welfare situation is not looking good. Because in the process of fixing the macroeconomic fundamentals, a lot of inflationary issues have been triggered, which significantly impacted on the welfare of the people. So there's a lot of social issues in the economy that a lot of citizens are complaining about. So when you talk about some of the gaps that we still need to deal with, there are gaps in the area of welfare, there are gaps in the area of productivity. But I must say, there are no quick fixes to these things. That is the reality.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Because I was going to go on and ask, and you've actually touched on some aspects of this. I was going to go on and ask that, well, as IMF is sort of being encouraging and is hailing Nigeria's economic reforms, they, however, note that poverty and food inflation are still, very much present and clear dangers to the objective of these reforms. So that's why I said you've actually touched on some aspects of this, because I was going to say, look, poverty, for instance, I can also put on your statement that these are not things that you're going to be able to sort out in a year or two. Food inflation is also there. You've spoken about it. So will this be spoiling efforts, or it just will be slowing them down? Because I know those in charge of our macroeconomic policies must be keeping an eye on all of these things, and they won't be waiting for anyone. They won't be waiting for anyone. The macroeconomy field will just carry on its own, and the managers of the economy are supposed to input the right things to get us to where we need to be.
Yes, the point is very important. Unfortunately, when you are managing an economy, sometimes there are some inherent conflicts in the way some policy instruments also operate or function. Now, even the IMF and the World Bank are major proponents of a market economy.
Okay.
You know, now the market economy has consequences for inflation. They have consequences for even the welfare issue that you just referenced. So that is why for some of us, we need to build an ideological consensus as to how exactly we want to manage the economy. Because there is no economy that you can manage strictly according to the extremes of the ideological economic framework. Whether I mean extremes of market economy or extreme of a socialist economy. You have to find a middle ground. So to the extent that the market system is good, a market system relates to things like, the floating of the currency, for instance. It relates to things like, the regulation, removal of subsidy, allowing the market also to determine interest rates and things like that. These are basic philosophies of market economy. But to the extent that this market economy sometimes could also be hurting the citizens, to the extent that some of these market economic principles may also be coming with high social costs, the intervention of government becomes very important in some key sectors of the economy. That is why even in the US, which is like the melting pot of capitalism, they support some critical sectors like transportation. They support critical sectors like agriculture, particularly agriculture. And occasionally, when energy prices are getting out of hand, the government also steps in to make sure that energy prices come down. So the point I'm making here is that as an ideology or as an economic management framework, we should be on the lookout for instances of market failure. So that where markets are hurting the people, the government needs to step in and intervene. Intervention can be in the form of subsidy. It can be in terms of reduction in import duty. It can be in terms of concessionary credits. These are the things that are done to mitigate the pains of some of these policies. And a bit of that is going on, but perhaps it's not going far enough.
Because I was going to ask.
I think.
Sorry, sir, because I was going to ask the question if any of that, in your view, is actually going on. And you said, well, perhaps at a minimal level.
Yes, a bit of that is going on. For instance, if you take energy, as we speak today, if we allow the power sector electricity providers to charge what they will call cost-reflective tariff.
Yes.
I don't think many people will not be able to afford electricity. Not even, because even the band A, that means you have to throw everybody into band A. And even at that band A, there may even be still some elements. So the electricity sector, as we speak today, is still being heavily subsidized by government.
And not very many people know that. Not very many people know that.
But not many people know. But the government is still heavily subsidizing it. That is why the discos and all of them are still saying that the current tariffs for band B downwards are still not cost reflective. That is why, as we speak today, the generating companies are saying that they are still being owed about 4 trillion or 5 trillion naira. These are bills that government is going to pick up. Again, you can see that even the government is resisting the increases in electricity tariff. So these are some areas in which the government is stepping in to minimize the social impact of the reform. Also, even in the foreign exchange market, initially second half of 2023, to the first half of 2024, we had what you can call a complete flotation of the currency. I'm talking of the exchange rate.
Yes.
Where the rates were galloping almost on daily basis. But from the second half of 2024 up to now, we have seen some steady and periodic intervention by the central bank. Because if you are talking of complete flotation, the central bank will not intervene at all. But what we have seen in the last few months is that the central bank regularly intervenes to ensure stability. That is also another example of how the government or agency of government intervene to ensure that we normalize prices and we minimize volatility in the economy. So the examples. Then in the area of infrastructure, you cannot leave infrastructure to the private sector entirely. That is one area where the government has a major role to play. Again, the extent of intervention in infrastructure also depends on the financial capacity of government. Because if you ask the private sector to come and be fixing roads and all of that, by the time they put the toll on the roads, not many people will be able to pay the toll. Look at what happened on the toll on Lekki-Epe Expressway. By the time the investors completed the project, for that investment to be viable, they put 3 toll plazas. That is what can make it viable from a private sector point of view. But from a social point of view, it was not feasible. Those toll plazas are still there till today.
Yeah. Because
that model was not working, they had to reduce the effective toll plazas to 1, which is the one very close to the Oriental Hotel. Then when the NSAS and all these things came up, it was vandalized. And as we speak today, there is no toll plaza on that route.
It's not working anymore.
The government has to, yes, the government had to pick the bill because it wasn't working because of the show, because those on that axis had to be protesting. How can they be paying 3 tolls on a road that is just a stretch of about maybe 40 kilometers or so? So these are instances of conflict between the private sector objective and the social objective and development objective.
And so government has to step in those cases, is what you're explaining.
Exactly. That is what the government did. The government had to pay off the investors on that road because it was supposed to be a PPP arrangement, it was supposed to be a concessioning thing. The government had to pay them off so that people can, make use of the road without paying anything. So the point I'm making is that managing an economy is not a tea party. It's not that easy. There are always trade-offs. There are always needs for intervention at various times. So these are the same thing with public transportation. One of the things that the citizens worry about is the high cost of public transportation.
Yes.
That is one area where government presence has to also be very, very pronounced. That is the way it is in many advanced economies. That's why many people don't put their cars on the road in many of those countries, because there are public transports that are heavily subsidized by government. But here, what we have over time is that the public transportation space is dominated by the private sector, almost 95% or more. So that is why the pain is so much. If you had stronger public sector presence or government provision in public transportation, the pain of all this subsidy removal will not be as much as it has been. So we need to define the role of government. We need to define the role of the private sector so that you don't have all these challenges about the fact that the reform is aggravating poverty and so on and so forth. But I must say again, those reforms were inevitable because the economy was was on the brink.
It was.
As at the time the administration took over, I'm not holding brief for them, but that is the reality. And those reforms needed to take place if you don't want a total collapse of the economy.
So yes. What I was going to ask you, first of all, IMF that I'm just using as a background here, they approved the tax reforms. They said, aha, now this is something good. So they approved that. So there's always this, this sort of drive to shore up a revenue. And one of the ways in which this is thought can be done is, with the tax reforms, so that a lot of tax that is not captured now will be captured. I don't know if you agree that this indeed will make a significant difference in terms of what we're talking about now, providing better funding for other crucial, chores that government has to, do.
That is very, very important. Because if the government doesn't have the resources, the tendency is to be accumulating more debts, which is also very injurious to the economy. But we need to look at these things from a number of perspectives. It has to be a combination of factors to ensure we have, fiscal sustainability. We have enough revenue.
Yes.
The first one is to ensure that we minimize waste and deal with the problem of corruption. The economy is still bleeding from corruption at all levels. Because again, let me also say, when we talk about economy, it's not only about the federal government. It's about the state government. It's about the local governments. Because all the tiers of government have things that they have to bring to the table to address both economic and social problems that we often complain about. So we need to ensure that even the little that we have, we use it, transparently, optimally, and we get value for money, and we minimize corruption. That is one. Secondly, is the fact that we need to optimize government assets. There are some countries in the world, they get more revenue from non-tax revenue by virtue of the assets that they have. We have huge assets in oil and gas, for instance. That is what most of the Middle East countries, that is what they leverage on.
Yeah.
They don't tax people that much. The tax there in those environments are very light. But they have assets that they utilize very well. They don't mismanage it. They don't abuse it. There is no corruption around it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is, I'm talking of oil and gas assets.
Yes.
But over the years, in our own climate, we have mismanaged that sector, unfortunately.
Okay. One moment, sir. Let me bring in retired AIG Duro Simi. He has called in. Good morning to you, sir. Good morning, sir. Thank you for calling in.
Listen to the man at the studio.
Dr. Muda Yusuf.
My contribution this morning is that agriculture is where we have our comparative advantage. We need to embark on agriculture. So recently, the president launched 2,000 tractors. Very good. But what I think we need is the smaller ones that can be used by small-scale farmers. The hand-grazing one, the one that looks like motorcycle. We need to bring more of that to Nigeria so that that type of thing can reach the nooks and crannies of Nigeria where the farmers actually reside. Number two, our protein, that is the animal we consume, the cow. Most of them are imported. I can say not less than 50% of the cow we consume are either from Benin Republic, Niger Republic, Chad, and etc. from across Africa. They know they have a good market there. We must develop our own indigenous, modern cattle that can stay in Nigeria instead of it importing. Virtually everything we are consuming is imported. So the animal scientists in our federal university should be encouraged to breed our own cows that can actually be brought, be breed in Nigeria and made available instead of depending on using server to import cows to Nigeria. Food is very important. That's a proverb that says, when food is out of poverty, poverty is no more. Government intervention in agriculture is very important. Then transportation. These gas buses that we're talking about, gas stations should be made available at the right places. And buses that are actually using gas, it should be brought and sold to our local transporters so that the Nigerians who are ready to abandon the car will have an alternative to move about without actually depending on buying this high-cost petrol. If government can do this, that means people who are campaigning about no food, no transport, will stop. And then we must secure the agricultural production belts. That is Benue, Niger, Plateau, Sokoto, Kebbi, at this raining season, because it's their planting season. The enemies of government are always ready to make sure that farmers are not allowed to go to their farms. After the planting, they will come back in the next 4 or 5 months again to attack these areas and ensure that even whatever they are able to produce are not out to get into the market. Government security agencies should ensure that agricultural production belts are well secured around here, and the enemies of the government are ready to continue to attack the farmers so that there is no production. Thank you, Uncle Yori.
Thank you very much, sir, for calling in. That's retired AIG Durosumi calling in from Lekki. I'll tell you what, Dr. Yusuf, before you react to that, let me quickly take a break so we can get that out of the way, and then I won't need to interrupt you once you begin to speak. Do stay with us, please. We'll be right back.